So today we're going to take one more day to go through some stuff that's not necessarily directly the Adobe Suite or AutoCAD or SketchUp or the purview of this class. And I use this lecture as a way of kind of telling you everything else that I think you should know. And I think the other thing about college is there's a lot of things that you're just expected to figure out on your own. And you don't necessarily have somebody who sits and talks to you about things like passwords and privacy and whatever. So it's a good kind of get you going in the class sort of thing. We're going to make sure our flash drives work today. We'll make sure we're backing up our flash drives. We'll deal with some of the programmatic things that are necessary to have a successful semester. So it's not an overly involved day. It's a lot of me talking, and then it's a lot of you guys just kind of making sure everything's working. Next week, Monday's a holiday. Yay. We're all taking that day off. At least I'm taking that day off, so I would encourage you to do the same thing. That means we come back on Wednesday of next week. So we only have one day of class next week. When you come back on Wednesday, it's on your little exercise handout today. Please bring whatever kind of photographic device you plan to use. It's probably your phone, and you probably would bring it anyway, but I like to try to remind you of that. We will start our photography section of the class, which also means that it won't be next week. It'll be the week after on Monday that we'll actually get into Photoshop for the first time. So for me, you guys need to take some photos to then learn how to work with the photos. A lot of times, instructors will start by handing you, here's some photos to work with that have problems with them, and why don't you learn how to fix them? I would rather have you start making your own problems and learning how to fix your own problems than me giving you problems. So we're going to go out and take some photos on that day, and then we'll come back the following week, and we'll actually sit down and learn how to post-process and start the whole Photoshop thing. So that's kind of the trajectory of where we're going over the next couple class days. You'll see that on the calendar a little bit later today anyway, so you kind of have an idea of where we're going. So today is kind of the overarching lecture about life and computer life, etc. So I'm going to start with thinking about how to organize your files. Because my guess is that most of you have a folder that you dump everything into, and that's about it. Maybe you're a little bit more organized than that. I'm hoping after today you might think about being a little bit more organized than that, and it will just save you a bunch of stress in your life. You may be at a point where you don't have that much stuff yet. This might be your first college class. It might be your first semester. You haven't started generating the wealth of documents and stuff that's associated with college, so this might not be that important just yet. But why not start talking about it now and learn how to manage it now so that it's a little bit less chaotic down the road? So there's a couple different ways of organizing your files. One is a flat file system. I say flat and fat because they tend to be really large folders with lots of stuff in them. This happens to be how my dad organizes his life, and it drives me nuts whenever I try to get something on his computer because it's all on his desktop. And there's probably 1,000 things on his desktop, and I can never find a thing. You guys might have parents like that. You guys yourselves might be like that. It can get really annoying when you're trying to organize stuff. But essentially, this is a stripped-down version of it. You have some folder called Documents, probably, because that's the default place that the operating systems, whether it's Mac OS or whether it's Windows, try to force you into. So chances are you probably put it there, or maybe it's the desktop. And then maybe you thought you were getting creative and getting a little bit more organized, and you said, I'll make a folder for Word documents, and I'll put all my Word documents in there. And that's fine, except that you could have thousands and thousands of Word documents, and that can be a little bit problematic. So the advantages and disadvantages of this system are essentially that it's organized by similar file types. I'm working on an Illustrator file, therefore I know all my Illustrator files are in one place. I'm working on a Word document, therefore all my Word files are in one place. There's an argument that that could be helpful. It's easy to find that specific type. Well, it must be in this folder somewhere. But again, remember, if you have 1,000 items in that folder, it takes a while to search through them and to find what you're looking for. It's also difficult to keep projects separate. So at the end of the semester, you want to back up your files from this semester. How do you know what's this semester versus last semester if they're all in the same folder? So if you organize it a little bit differently, it makes backups a lot easier. So a hierarchy might be a different and or better system to kind of sort that out. So in this scenario, you would set up, like, let's say I have a folder that's called Documents. I'm using that as the generic folder. Inside of that Documents folder, I might put something like School. That's kind of a broad topic. Inside of that school folder, I might put subfolders for each class I'm taking. I'm taking 135, I'm taking 121, I'm taking whatever, English and history or whatever else you're taking. I'm taking those classes, so I'll make folders for those classes. Then I'll put my files related to those classes into those folders, which can be a pretty good, advantageous thing. It's organized essentially by projects. So instead of, these are all the files of a specific type, these are all the files that are associated with a particular project. And this is really beneficial when we get into, like, say, InDesign, when we're trying to do layouts. In InDesign, you're going to have some Word files, some text files. You're going to have some photos. You might have some other stuff that's going in there. And if you have all of that in the same folder, it keeps you much more organized. You know where everything is, as opposed to being scattered. We'll get into that a little bit more when we get to InDesign. Easy to find your files, easy to keep your projects separate. And if you really wanted to, you knew something was a Word file and you didn't know where it was, you can always search for it. And you can create a smart folder that essentially does the other system if you need it. So to me, there's no real loss in setting this up. So for you, you're here on your flash drive. You want to think about organizing your files on your flash drive. What I would suggest is you have your root of your flash drive. Inside, right on that root of your flash drive, you will have a folder for probably your OneDrive. I'm going to encourage you all today to start backing up your work using the OneDrive system. I'm a Mac guy. I'm not a Windows guy. But OneDrive's actually pretty good. And I'll be willing to admit that. Furthermore, it's built into all these computers. And it works really pretty darn well. It lets us do backups directly to our flash drives and sync those files that are on our flash drives. So I'm going to encourage you to use that. You guys, as students at DBC, through your Insight account, all have 25 gigs for free, which is pretty nice. That should be able to back up the bulk of your work for this semester without a problem. So at the root of your flash drive, you'll have a folder that'll be OneDrive. OneDrive specifies the name of it. It is what it is. It's like OneDrive - Contra Costa Community College, blah, blah, blah. It's a really long name. That'll be on your flash drive. And everything that you put into that file will end up being backed up and synced with OneDrive. So that's a good thing. Remember, you only have 25 gigs of that. So I also tend to put a second folder outside of that OneDrive folder. So there's that OneDrive folder right there. Outside of that, I also put a folder for resources. These are things that you could get again relatively easily. Oh, and in this class, not so relevant, but let's say V-Ray materials. Oh, I got a whole bunch of V-Ray materials. That's no problem. I can download them again. So if you can go find them on a website and download them again, they could go in the resources folder. They don't need to be backed up because they're easily accessible. So I keep things like that outside of the OneDrive, and I don't make OneDrive actually back it up, which is an advantage from a space-saving standpoint. So if we continue on with the OneDrive folder, the next set would have folders for each of your classes. Inside of each of those folders, then you'd have subfolders for assignments, exercises, portfolio, etc. So you're just developing project-based organization here. Naming things. So it doesn't really matter what you name files until you go back and try to find them later. And you're saying, oh, well, I'll remember. I'll remember what I named that file. Well, yeah, you might. You might remember it for a while. But fast forward. Let's say you're coming back, you're applying to grad school, and you need to go find that project that you did when you were a sophomore. Do you remember what it was called? It's 5-7 years later. You're probably not going to remember anymore. So if you develop some kind of a naming scheme, it can be advantageous because you can find things based on names. You know how you name things. So this is what I'm going to suggest that you guys set it up as. Let's see if I have. Yeah, we'll start with the prefix first. So for me, this was something I started doing in grad school, and it worked for me. Now I'm up here talking to you about, hey, you should do this, and you should do that, and you should do this. Just because I'm up here saying it doesn't mean it works for every single one of you. There are people that already have a naming scheme. You already named files a certain way. Do it that way. It's fine. All I'm trying to do today is cause you to stop, pause, and think, is there a better way to do what I'm doing? That's it. So if you disagree with what I'm doing, that's OK. You don't have to do it. I'm not going to come over and look at your flash drive and say, oh, you didn't name it correctly. I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to do that. So this is just a suggestion. This is how I set it up. I said, OK, I want to identify what class all the files from that class are going to be part of. So I'm going to develop a prefix that goes in front of the file name that says, hey, this is what class it is. And the way that I did it is I took the first letter of the subject. So in the case of architecture, it would be A. Then I took the course number, 121, 135, whatever it is. And then after that, I put the first letter of the last name of the professor. Now, for you guys, it doesn't really matter too much because you're only taking a class once. You're only going to take 135 one time. At least I hope you only take it once. You only take 136 once. However, when you get further along in school, when you get to the upper division studios, you get to grad school, you end up taking the same class, the same studio class, several times. So in grad school at Berkeley, for example, you take a 201 studio 3 times. So I couldn't just say A201 because that doesn't distinguish it a little bit more. Yeah, question?
Why?
Why do I do this, or why did I come up with the name? Oh, so yeah, no, absolutely. So when you get to the studio classes, like at a grad level or at an undergrad level, it would be the 101s, probably. Essentially, you've satisfied all the prerequisites to get to that point. And at that point, you're looking for studio credits, so units in a studio. And instead of having separate, like, this is a 201, this is 202, 203, the studios change every semester. So in a given semester, there might be 3 different 201 classes, all taught by different people with different subject matters. One set of people is doing a museum, one set of people is doing housing, another set of people is doing some project in China. And so you say, I really want to be in that studio. And they match you up, and hopefully you get in the studio you want, and you say, OK, that's great. Then the next semester, you say, oh, well, in this one, there's a visiting professor coming in from Japan, and there's another one that's doing a comprehensive studio that's on holistic building, and there's another one that's doing floating structures. And you say, I'm not interested in floating structures. I'll take the visiting architect from Japan. So you're at a place in your career, in your architectural studies, where you have that ability to choose what subject is interesting. So they're all numbered the same, but the subjects are different. And so they're just required from a graduation standpoint to get a certain number of units. And you're picking which one you want. So it's just the way that they set things up. Does that help answer the question? So you're still a ways off from that. You're not going to be in that place. When you take 220, for example, you're going to take whatever Anthony's teaching in 220 for that semester, or whoever's teaching 220. You're just kind of potluck. That's the way it works. When you get further along in studio, you'll be able to do it with a little bit more choice. So that's what I put in the front. The other thing is at the back end of the file, you guys probably do this already, you have a tendency to number it, correct? This is my English paper 01. This is the next version. This is the next draft. It's 02. This is 03. Or maybe it's just 1, 2, 3, etc. So I added one extra little thing to that. I put a letter after it too. And this allows you to, when you think about doing an architecture project, or any design project, an industrial design project, whatever, you tend to have major revisions and minor revisions. So you have a major revision, you go in, you keep working on it, you do some minor revisions, you get to a mid-review, you go talk to somebody, you get reviewed, then you're doing another major revision, and then you do some minor revisions. So this allows you to separate out the major and minor revisions. The numberings, the big steps, the letterings, the small steps. Just a finer grain control. If you want to just stick with numbering, that's OK too. So if we put it all together, in the front half, we have this designator that says what the class is. And at the back half here, we have what version and edition this particular file is. And then you can put whatever you want in the middle. I could care less. So it's just a way of organizing your files and thinking about how you're naming certain things. A couple notes about file names. File names shouldn't contain any spaces if they're going to be uploaded to the web. So if you plan on uploading files, putting spaces in makes it kind of nasty. If you ever put a space in if let's say you're browsing in Chrome and you put a space in the web address up there, what does it do? It goes to Google, right? And searches for that term as opposed to going to a direct address. So if you're looking for a particular file and has spaces in it, it gets really kind of nasty. So when we upload things, we try not to have spaces. We use dashes or underscores where the spaces would be. If you're just keeping it on your computer, your local files, it doesn't make any difference. You can have spaces in the file names. The other thing is stay away from special characters. Don't use forward slashes, question marks, those kinds of things, because those mean things in computer programming languages. The period, for example, when you have a file name and then you have a period, whatever comes after the period tells the computer, the operating system, what to open your file in. If you have .jpeg, it says, oh, well, I should open it in whatever the default photo editor is. If you have .something in your file name, the operating system can get confused. You've probably had this happen before, where it doesn't know what to open it in. It pops up the thing, what do you want to open this file in? So if we add extra periods, that's problematic too. So we stay away from special characters. 3-2-1 backup. So this is not my principle. This is something that was developed from a multimedia guild of artists in San Francisco called the Pixel Corps. And so they came up with this idea of backup. And I think it's a really good one to think about how you back up your files. So first off, whenever you're doing something on your computer, if you want it to be safe, you should always have 3 copies of that file. And that sounds like a lot. It sounds a little daunting. You have your primary working copy, and you have 2 backup copies of that file. OK, so that's number 3. 2 is that it should be on 2 different mediums. So you have one on your hard drive, you have one on a flash drive. You have one on your hard drive, you have one up in the cloud somewhere. So it should be 2 different mediums, because any medium can fail. And the one is that 1 copy shouldn't be with you. So 3 copies, 2 different mediums, one of which is not with you. So it's somewhere away. It's somewhere off-site. That's protecting your data. So the way I always look at this is if your house were to burn down, would you still have what you were looking for? Would you still have that file? So this backup thing ends up being really, really important. You say, well, wait a minute, that sounds really hard. How am I supposed to keep 3 copies of my files? I only have 1 flash drive. How's this going to work? Well, it works out fairly easily. And it should happen in the background, and it shouldn't be too hard. So what we're going to do is you're going to plug in your flash drive to your computer, and you're going to have your primary working copy on that flash drive. You're typing your English paper. It's saved to your flash drive. Great. I've got it there. Then we're going to sync that folder on your flash drive into your OneDrive account. Once we do that, as soon as you save your work, it'll go up to the cloud. So at that point, we satisfied a second copy. It's up in the cloud. And it's off-site. It's not where we are. It's up in the cloud somewhere, floating around. So that's great. We got almost everything. We need that 3rd copy of the file to be perfectly safe. We installed whatever it is, OneDrive on our home computer. That copy magically goes to our home computer, stored there. We have 3 copies of our file, 2 different mediums. 1 is off-site. Pretty easy. You didn't have to do anything, other than you had to set up the backup system in the first place. So this is where I tell you all the doom and gloom stories. I told you I was gonna get into some of these. I can't help myself but to try to encourage you to work on this backup. How many people have had their computer crash and lose data? OK? Sucks, doesn't it? So, a couple quick stories. First story, personal story, happened to me. Well, actually, I'll probably tell 2 stories. OK? My office wasn't over here at that point. This is probably 4 years ago. My office was across the way. I was sitting in the office at the end of the semester. I had just finished the last day of the semester. Everything was done. I hit submit on the final grades. I turned around. I came back to my computer, and my computer was black. What? What happened? Try to boot it up. Won't boot. Won't boot. Won't boot. Well, I don't get it. What's the problem? So being reasonably tech savvy and whatever, I said, OK, well, I'll pull the hard drive and take a look at the hard drive and see what happened. So I turn it over, pull the hard drive. Nothing looks wrong. Pull it out, put it in an external bay, stick it in another computer. Completely dead. Completely dead. Not recoverable. Every single thing I had on that hard drive on my computer was gone. Did I panic? Did I lose everything? No, because I had a complete backup of it. So it's fine. Okay, second story. Similar time of year. This was in November, a couple years later. we were going to pick out a Christmas tree. It's a tradition for our family to go actually cut down a Christmas tree. So I had my kids and I had my dogs. They were all in my truck. My wife was there. We get out of the truck. The dogs were just being a pain. We left them in the truck. We go out and we try to find our Christmas tree. We come back. They're all jumping all over everything. My kids are like, oh, we need hot chocolate. And it's, it's just the chaos. You can imagine this chaos. If you've been around kids, you know chaos can happen, right? So there's just chaos. I'm like, okay, we can get the hot chocolate. And we're trying to get the Christmas tree in the back and everything's chaos. I take the hot chocolate and I put it in my cup holder in the center console. No big. I put drinks in the cup holder all the time, right? Forget about it. Go on, move on. Before I know it, my dog jumps from the back seat. This is a golden retriever, so it's a big dog. Jumps from the back seat into the front seat to try to sit in my seat. Real intelligent, right? In the process, hits the full cup of hot chocolate. The full cup of hot chocolate tips over, pours into the right in front of the center console where I have my laptop bag. Furthermore, my computer, my laptop, is in the bag, but it's in upside down, so all the vents that allow access to the inside of the computer to cool the computer are facing right at the hot chocolate. The entire cup of hot chocolate poured into the inside of my computer. The computer was dead. It was not recoverable. So had I not backed up all my stuff, I would have lost absolutely everything on that computer for the second time. So those are just two personal experiences for me. Let's one-up this. Let's go to one of the student experiences. This is probably 8 years ago. I gave this lecture, and luckily, the student listened to me. Okay, this was a girl. She was great. She went on to Berkeley, and she came to me towards the end of the semester, and she looked really upset. And I'm like, hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? She said, can I just give you a hug? I'm like, whoa, why? Like, this is a little odd. She's like, I listened to what you said, and I just went out to my car, and my window was broken out. Somebody grabbed my laptop bag. This was like a week before finals. She said, I would have lost everything, but I had a backup copy, and I can still pass my classes because I have a backup copy. So thank you for making me have a backup copy. So the point is, this can happen to you. And if it doesn't happen to you, it will happen to you. If it hasn't happened, it will happen. Every single person in this room will have, sorry, I lost my slides there, will have a computer crash at some point. So if you have photos that are important, if you have documents that are important, find a way to keep those backed up. The backups have to happen on an automatic basis. If you say, you know what, it's cool. I got an external hard drive. When I get home, I'm going to plug in my external hard drive and I'm going to copy what I did today, and I'll just, like save it on the external hard drive. What's going to happen is you're going to be going along in the semester. You're going to be like, I just finished that mid-review. That was awesome. I'm so happy. It went great. Let's go out and let's have dinner. Oh, and then maybe dinner leads to a later night. Hey, let's go to the movies. All right, whatever. You're all excited. You come home. Boy, I'm tired. I just go to bed. Did you back up your files? Nope. Next day, you wake up in the morning, you say, oh, this is a great morning, I'm going to go for a run, that's good. Did you back up your files? Nope. Then you get to school, and you say, oh, man, I should have backed up my files. Well, when I get home tonight, I'll make sure I back them up. Then you get home, and you get distracted with something else. Somebody asks you to mow the lawn, you got to go do that, and you forget to back up your files. Before you know it, it's been a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you haven't backed up your files. Then your computer crashes, and you lose everything. So it has to happen automatically in the background to be safe. So there's built-in solutions, whether you're on a Mac or on Windows, where you can set these things to back up on their own. It used to be real external hard drive centric, where like you always had to be connected to like a network drive or something to back up, and they pushed this, meaning Windows and OS 10 or Mac OS, pushed this whole, back up your files and whatever. Now the truth is almost everything syncs to the cloud. So it's not so much you're using this, you're doing off-site backups instead. These are some aftermarket solutions doing the same thing that the built-in ones do. These are all for external hard drives or network-attached storage backup solutions. So they're not really as relevant anymore as the cloud, the online backup solutions here. Dropbox is a great one. I used to use Dropbox in class pretty exclusively. OneDrive, because of the 25 free gigs for you guys as students, seems to be working a little bit better. A lot of people use Google Drive to store their stuff, which is great. Google Drive works awesome on your home computer. It works great online. It works terribly in the lab. Sorry, it is what it is. So yes, I've had students do it, but you're stuck downloading a big file and then uploading, and it's not quite clean. You know, something happens and you didn't remember to back up your file or put it back in the cloud. It just doesn't work as well. OneDrive is the one that I'm going to push for you guys today. 25 free gigs. I think that's a pretty good solution. There are other paid solutions. Carbonite is one where it'll back up your whole computer all the time and you don't ever lose anything. OwnCloud is it's kind of like all the rest of them, except you have to run your own server. For the security-minded people, it's really nice because you have your own server and you run your own system and you're not trusting anybody else with your data. That happens to be what I use for my stuff. And then there's a bunch of other ones out there. But that's kind of become the standard for how you back up your stuff. So the cool thing about it is I say originally back up nightly, and you'll see all these slides as they go forward. The truth is, when you're using an online solution like that and syncing, it's basically backup immediately. So you never go without a backup. As soon as you save the file, as soon as you do a little bit of work, there it's backed up. So it's kind of automatic right on the, as opposed to just nightly. It's all the time. Weekly, monthly, you guys get the picture here. And semesterly and yearly, the one thing I'll add in the side note to this is when you finish a class, let's say you worked on 121 all semester, when you're done with that work, as ridiculous as this sounds, even though we don't even have disks anymore, put it on something, a disk, a flash drive or whatever, and put that flash drive somewhere and just save it. Because when you go back to do your portfolio down the road and you want to go find that class, it's a whole lot easier to say, oh, I'll just dig in the drawer, here's the flash drive from that class, and I can go back and use it. So if you have that big backup that sits somewhere, that can help, if it's a disk or a flash drive or whatever. So offsite peace of mind, just another thing that's really important. And do you have something that's backed up somewhere else? Do you feel safe about it? So the story I like to tell about this, and I try to tell these stories to make you guys think about these scenarios that happen, because they're all real life things that happen. So the one I tell about this is my wife. So my wife's from the Central Valley. She grew up in Yuba City, which is up by Marysville. And she was in high school, and she was abroad. She was in, I think she was in France at the time. And she got a call from her stepdad. And her stepdad said, the levee's going to break. What do you want from your room? Think about that. You have 30 minutes. What do you want? Same thing happened with these most recent fires and stuff, right? You guys, the Napa fire, the Camp Fire, etc. Let's say somebody came and knocked on your door and said, you've got 10 minutes to leave your house. What do you grab? It's a good mental exercise to go through. And I'm not trying to do this to make you depressed. I'm not trying to make you scared of life. I'm just trying to say, hey, what's important? I know exactly what I'd go grab. I'd go grab my external hard drive bay. Boop. Okay, got everything. It sounds silly, right? But I have pictures of my kids when they were born. I have pictures of when I got married. Those pictures are really valuable to me. I don't want to lose those. So I make sure that I know where they are, and I make sure that I know where they're safe. I take it one step further. Okay, this is how ridiculous I am about these sorts of things. I take all the pictures that are really important, wedding, birth of kids, those kinds of things. I burn them onto disks, as antiquated as that is. And I go to my bank and I stick them in my safety deposit box. I can tell you what, the bank robbers are going to be really disappointed when they open my safety deposit box. It's just a stack of disks. But I know that those are safe. I know I will not lose those. So I have them backed up in other places, but I also know that they're safe there. So is that an extreme? Absolutely. It's way too extreme, actually. But I've gone through the thought process of trying to decide what is important and what isn't important. And I know what's important, and I know what I'd take. So can you do the same thing? Will you do the same thing? It can be a great exercise to go through. So we'll switch away from the doom and gloom. I'm sorry for depressing you all, but sometimes it's necessary. And we're going to talk about calendars now. So we talked about file organization. Now it's time to go into calendars and thinking about that kind of organization. How many people keep a calendar on a regular basis? You guys are all so scared of me still. Right? Like, yeah, kind of. So calendars are really important. It allows you to stay organized and to have an understanding of what's happening in your life. I'll tell you right now, As your life progresses, this gets more and more complicated. So it's one thing if it's just you. You have a calendar. You have work. You have school. Great. Then you get married and you have a significant other, etc. Now you have your work and your school and their work and their school. That got complicated. Then you have a kid and you start to have their appointments. Then you have 2 kids and you start to have their appointments. Then you have 3 kids and then you start to have their appointments. It's like the whole calendar is completely covered all the time. So staying organized is absolutely critical. So a couple things that are important about it. If you can subscribe to a calendar, all the better, because you didn't have to put the data in. You just get it. So in this class, I have the calendar feeds for you. We're going to do this today. You'll subscribe and you'll get all of the information that I put on the calendar directly into your calendar. If I change the due date for an assignment, I'll move that in my calendar. All of you will get the updated moved date. Works really slick. If you're a big sports fan, you could put in the sports calendars of your various teams so you'll know when they're playing, etc. You could subscribe to these and then you don't have to manually put them in. The other thing that's important is you have to make sure that your calendars will sync to the devices that you use. So if you use an iPhone, you have to make sure that you have something that syncs with the iOS system. If you have a Samsung, you have to make sure it's in the Android system, etc. It should sync from your phone to your computer to your iPad to whatever it is that you use. Anybody still use a paper calendar? Okay, a couple of you still use a paper calendar. My wife is a big paper calendar person, and it drives me nuts because it only exists in this one book that's in one place. And if I'm out, if I'm here, if I'm looking at, I have no idea what she's doing or what's scheduled. And I have to remember to go look in this little tiny book and make sure that it's in, it's crazy. Anyway, I would highly encourage you to switch over into the digital realm. It's a lot easier to keep track of it because then whatever's in front of you, you can see it. So we've got options. Google, Yahoo, Outlook. You probably all have one. If I said, how many people have a Google email, a Yahoo email, or an Outlook email? I bet almost all of you would raise your hands because it's just that out there. iCloud also, a lot of people that are in the Apple ecosystem have that. These are all great options for calendars. They all have good calendar options. I will probably today focus mostly on Gmail and Google's calendar. They're all virtually the same. They all have the same features. They can all do the same thing. If you guys work in the Yahoo ecosystem, no problem. If you work in the Outlook ecosystem, that's fine too. We can still subscribe to everything. Here's our Google Calendar. This is a lot like what yours is going to look like. Notice that the dates are from last semester or last fall, not this fall, but you get the idea. So here, you guys will subscribe, and you'll get the, right, ignore the fact that the dates are wrong. On each day, you'll see first one, oh, there's 135, lecture 102, technology, etc. Oh, then we move into lab. What's going on in the lab? There it is, all booked out. So you guys will see that. It has locations in it, so it'll tell you how long it'll take to get there, those kinds of things as well. If you're in my second class, you would get the second class appearing there. Furthermore, you can always turn on and turn off various calendars. So if you want to turn off my calendars for a while, you can do that. This really helps stay organized. If we look, that's Google's calendar. If we look in, oh, this is the month view of Google's calendar. So essentially the same thing, but in month view. Here we are, month view of, is this one, this is Outlook, I think? Yeah, this is Outlook. Basically the same thing. Right? I don't even know if I have Yahoo up here. Yep, there's Yahoo. So depending on who you're using, what email service you're using, chances are you have a calendar, and I'll walk you through how to subscribe to our calendar today. Email. So the average person has 3 email accounts. How many people have at least 3 email accounts? Ah, we're well above average. Okay. One is typically for the friends and the family. One is typically your work or school email account. And one is that garbage account that you opened when you were 16 that you don't really use. Maybe you have more. The number of emails sent, this is a couple years old, so it's probably even higher than that. The number of emails sent by humanity each day is 196.3 billion emails. That's a lot. The average person sends and receives 121 emails per day. How many people think they're well above 121 emails per day? I am. I think I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 500 a day. of what's coming through. So this is really important to try to organize this. So you want to think about what email accounts you have, and you want to strip down to as few accounts as possible. You could do that by forwarding emails into other accounts. So you pick that one email that you're going to stick with, the one that you're going to use, and you take your old emails and you funnel it into that one. And before too long, everybody learns that that's your new email and that's what they're sending and receiving to. But you don't miss anything. And furthermore, you don't have to log in and check the separate email. So your school email, for example, your Insight email, my guess is that you guys aren't super excited about using that email, and it's kind of a pain to log into and whatever. So you can go to your Insight Outlook account, and you could say, I want to forward all the copies of the emails that come into this account to my other email account. And so you never even have to go in and check that one anymore because they automatically get forwarded to your new email account. I do that with my DVC email. So gadams@dvc.edu, same kind of thing as your Insight one. That one gets automatically forwarded into my grant at Digital Tools for Architects. So anything that comes in there gets shipped over. It's a good strategy. Decide which email addresses you want to use and stick with them. This is also a good point to think about whether sexyhotdaddy123@gmail.com is the right email going forward. No, that was not my email. But you want to think about what presents a professional front for you. So sometimes when you're, young, you open an email account that's not maybe the most formal. Now would be a good time. I had an example. A cousin of mine had an email account when he graduated high school and was going into college, and it was his name, theking@gmail.com. Probably not best email to use when you're applying for a job later on. And he went and got a separate Gmail account that was his name, first name, last name @gmail.com. Much better. So think about maybe switching to that kind of a professional email and starting to use that. You guys are all old enough for that to be appropriate at this point. So you decide what email address you want to use, start forwarding all the other email into that. You're basically funneling all your email into one account. You're checking that one account and you're working with that one account. You want to be real aggressive about your spam filters because that's going to drive you nuts long term when you get all the emails for the things you don't want. You want to mark them as spam and use your spam filters as opposed to unsubscribing. Now, if you get an email from Pottery Barn and you're really tired of getting your emails from Pottery Barn, sure, go ahead and click on the unsubscribe button. It'll probably work. But if you get an email for go-kart racing and you've never been go-kart racing and you've never heard of the company, clicking on the unsubscribe button in that email is like saying, hey, guess what? This is a good email. Why don't you keep sending me stuff? So you want to avoid that unsubscribe unless you really know the website. If it's Pottery Barn or, I don't know, Crate and Barrel or some known company, Macy's, Nordstrom, whatever, you can unsubscribe from those. That's reasonable. If you guys want a really fun thing to watch on your own, it's about 10 minutes long or so. There's a TED Talk done by a guy who replies to spam email for the fun of it. It's fantastic. He's really funny. Anyway, if you do a Google search for TED Talk spam email, you'll find it. And there's a short YouTube link if you want to get that to watch it. It's a great little fun side note. So when you go to forward your email, this is Gmail's way of forwarding. All of the email clients are a little bit different. In this, you're going to go to your settings, and you're going to look here under forwarding and pop IMAP settings. The first option here is to forward a copy of your incoming mail, and you'll be able to specify what email address you want to have it sent to. It's blurred out here, so you don't have all my email addresses, but you get the idea where you can have it sent to something, and then you tell it what to happen, what to do with it afterward. Pretty easy to set up, and once it's done, all your email just comes into the other account. If you're in Outlook, it's a very similar strategy here. You're down here in the account setting. There's something called forwarding, and then basically you hit that button and say start forwarding to this address. It's pretty easy. So it lets you make sure you get that important Insight email without having to go and check that email account separately. Maybe you guys already do this, but the other thing that you can do is you can use an email client that helps you get through your email quickly. And this might not seem like that important, but if you use one that has gestures, it can really help. So there's one that I use. It's called Spark by Readle. and it's gesture-based, so you can be looking at your email and you can just swipe it. And it'll archive, or you can swipe it the other direction, it'll mark it as spam. So you can go through real quick, archive, spam, and it's based on the length of your swipe. So it's pretty easy to get through. If you want to play around with it, by all means, go for it. It's free. Google Voice is another option out there for you if you want to be able to give out your phone number but not give out your real phone number. Sound familiar? I gave out my phone number but not my real phone number. So I have a Google Voice number. Basically, you can get a phone number from Google. You can receive calls on that number. You can forward that number wherever you want. You can get text messages on that number. If somebody leaves you a voicemail on that number, it'll transcribe it and text it to you and say what they said, so you don't actually have to listen to the voicemail. It's pretty cool. It's free, and you can set up like custom greetings and whatever on it as well. So when you guys text me that number that I gave you, it's actually texting my Google Voice number. It happens to forward directly into my phone, so I still see it as a text message and whatever, but I didn't give you my actual phone number, which is kind of nice. So I reserve that for me. So it's out there. It's something you can play around with if you want. Let's talk about architecture and the web. And really, let's talk about the web a little bit to begin with. So how the internet works. So we're just all at a place now where the internet is just there. And it's always there. And we're just used to it. But if we stop and think about it, it's these rooms of server farms, these rooms of servers and computers that are sitting there that run the whole back end of the internet system. There's something called the DNS system, the domain name system, that allows us to find a given company or website. So the way this works is kind of like a reverse phone book. You type in www.apple.com, and the DNS system comes back and says, OK, the address, the computer's address, kind of like your address for your house, the computer address where the computer exists on the internet, is this string of numbers, 17.172.22.224.47. And actually, those of you that have your computers up, you could type in that right now. And if you type in that string of numbers, guess what? Apple's web page will come up. Now, if we had to remember every time we wanted to go to apple.com this string of numbers, it would be really hard. So this is a great system for allowing us to say, oh, I can go to apple.com, and that's where the computers are. Furthermore, if Apple decided to move their server somewhere else, they can just change that number. They can change the address, and all the traffic will still get there. We access the internet through a web browser. You've got a bunch of options out there. They all have benefits. They all have, well, they're at the point where it doesn't really matter which one you pick. Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge are both the Microsoft versions that are baked into Windows. Safari is the one that's baked into Macs. Then you have Firefox, Chrome, and Opera, which is still somehow hanging on as a browser, but it is there. Most of you probably never even heard of it. Anyway, most of you probably use Chrome. That would be my guess. Chrome is considered the best and fastest web browser for regardless of platform, whether you're on Windows or on the Mac, though a lot of times people use what's ever default on the computers. A couple things to consider about web browsers. Number one, do you have any extra add-ons that are in there? It might be like Ebates, I get cash back on my shopping. It might be block all the ads so I don't see them. It might be a web development plugin that shows you the web code as it's loading, depending on what it is that you're doing. How fast is the browser? Truth is, most of them are fast anyway, so it doesn't really matter anymore. It used to matter, not so much anymore. And then there's another big one. And it's something called cross-site tracking. And you guys have probably experienced this, though you might not have realized it just yet. There's a big kind of discussion about general security and privacy in the internet space right now. One of these kind of hot button issues is the idea of cross-site tracking. And so when you go to a website, sometimes on some websites, a third-party company, so a company that's not the company that you visited, will install a little piece of software on your computer, a little cookie. And that cookie will then start tracking what websites you go to, what things you're interested in, what you look at, etc. And it will report back to that company, hey, this is what this person's interested in. And lo and behold, when you go and start looking for things, the ads you see, the advertisements on the sides of the page, are all the things that you have been looking at. You guys noticed this happen before? It's really classic with Amazon, right? You browse something in Amazon, and then immediately all the ads you ever see are whatever it is that you browsed. So we can choose to stop cross-site tracking. The good news is with Chrome and Safari, I know you can do it with those two. I'm pretty sure you can do it with Firefox. Actually, I know you can do it with Firefox. I don't know about the Microsoft products. I don't use them enough to really know. You can actually choose to disable this feature. You can say, please don't track me. Please don't install these little cookies. If you're in Chrome, it's available under your advanced settings under privacy and security. You can send this do not track request with your browsing traffic. So it's a way of saying, no, I don't want that. Please don't install that. Please don't track my stuff. Now, that also means that your ads might be random, as opposed to you might be getting ads for things that you're not interested in at all. And so maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. From a privacy standpoint, it's kind of nice not to have somebody tracking you. In Safari, it's the same thing. You can, under the privacy settings, you can check the box for prevent cross-site tracking. So Wi-Fi. Are you being safe with Wi-Fi? You guys know there's Wi-Fi on campus, right? No surprise, you probably logged into it. The thing about Wi-Fi is you have to be aware that it's a big network and there's a whole bunch of computers on it. So I'm not on the student Wi-Fi, I'm on the faculty Wi-Fi. And you would be shocked at how many faculty have open computers on the faculty Wi-Fi. And what I mean by open computers is I can see their files or I could put things on their computers. Not too secure. And it's all because they're just not aware. I don't think they want their computers to be wide open. You, when you're browsing stuff, need to be aware of the same thing. So if you share files or if you opened up your computer for sharing, you have to be aware that you're opened up for sharing. And you might not want it to be that way. Now, of course, if you're browsing like your bank account, you see that little green lock that shows up? It's SSL encrypted, no problem. You're not losing anything. It's not a problem. So the sharing is one thing. The other thing is if you're browsing insecure websites, it is theoretically possible for somebody to sniff your traffic and figure out what it is that you're looking at. Do I think that's a particularly big deal? No. I think if somebody was sitting here trying to watch what you were doing, I don't think they'd do it because I think it's too much work. But be aware that it is theoretically possible because you're on an open public Wi-Fi network. Now, if you're at home, no big deal. Assuming you have a password on your Wi-Fi network at home, you're good. So if you're on your home network, don't leave any of the generic passwords on them. Change them to be something a little bit better. Don't leave the default accounts. Let's put it this way. If you were going to do something bad, okay, let's say we were bad people and we wanted to pirate a movie, and you lived in an apartment building, would you pirate the movie on your own Wi-Fi network, or would you go to your neighbor's Wi-Fi network that was insecure and do it on their network? Probably their network. Just saying. I'm not saying to do it. I'm just saying that's what happens. So you don't want your neighbor, who's the bad person. Now, of course, all of you are good people and you would never do that. But your neighbor might be the bad person, and they would do it on your network. So save yourself the hassle and say, nope, I'm securing my network. Set up that. Use at least the WPA 128-bit encryption on your Wi-Fi. My guess is that that's enabled by default for almost everything now. WP was the old technology. Stay away from that. It's being cracked. So a virtual private network is another thing that I like to throw out there because people tend not to be aware of what it is or what it can do. And so this kind of technology essentially allows you to create an encrypted connection to somewhere and then to go out from the internet from that place. And there are companies that use this. Let's say that I have a corporate laptop and I want to be able to log into my corporate system. You could do this at DVC, for example. I can create a virtual private network where I'm connecting encrypted from my computer to that company, and then I can access the resources at that company. So it's like a tunnel that I'm going through the rest of the internet. Say nobody else can see it. You can set this up using the same technology through a company that deliberately anonymizes your content. So you could connect to one of these companies and you could say, I don't want to be tracked, I don't want anybody to know who I am, and you could access the internet through that company, which is kind of an interesting way. The other thing that you can do is you can shift your geographic location. So the best example that I have of this and a real life use case for it is my father-in-law lives in Ecuador half the year. 9 months out of the year, a little bit more than half the year. And he has email accounts from here in the States, And when he goes down there, he can't actually check his email accounts because they're blocked down there. So in order for him to check his email, he needs a company like this so that he can create a connection to the United States to then check his email. So he's shifting his geographic location to that place to be able to access that content. I've heard of people doing this with like the BBC broadcasts and stuff. They want to be able to see the BBC broadcast. They can't see it in the States, so they'll shift their location to be in the UK, and then they'll be able to see that content. So it does happen. These are a couple different companies. You can do a Google search for them. There's lots of different companies. And I have a couple graphics that help kind of show how this works. You've got your computer. Typically, it's unencrypted out to the internet. And in this scenario, you've got an encrypted connection to the company, and then you could go out or have a different physical location. So I think sometimes it's easiest to actually show you a little bit of a demo here on how this stuff works. So bear with me for a second. So I went ahead and I went to a website called ipleak.net that will find out what your IP address is. There's lots more. There's what's my IP, etc. And when you run one of these tests like this, it's going to go out and it's going to say, OK, what is your current IP address? So I'm connected to the DVC network. This is the address of my computer at this location, 192.235.150, etc. If I scroll down here a little bit, guess what? It knows, there's my address. I'm in the United States, I'm in California, and I'm in Pleasant Hill. It has an approximate latitude and longitude for me. Furthermore, down here, it contains detailed information. It knows that I'm running a Mac on OS 10. It knows what version of OS 10 I'm running. Right? It knows what my platform is. It knows my screen resolution. All this stuff. You can do this. This is not a big secret. Okay? Now, if I say, you know what, let me connect to a virtual private network, and I'm going to pick, this one's in Australia. This is in Sydney. I'm just doing this as the illustration of it. I'm going to connect to Australia using this same technology. There it is, and now I'm connected to Australia. I come back and I refresh this. Now remember, I was just at DVC. And now my IP address is 137.59.252.192, and I'm in Australia. And if I come down here to my physical location, where I'm accessing the internet from, it's in Australia. Right, there I am, in Sydney. So this technology exists and allows you to do this. And so there may be use cases going down the road where something like this is important to you. And the reason that I tell you this kind of stuff in a lecture like this is I want you to be aware of what's out there so that you can make these decisions and you can do this. Because my guess is nobody else would tell you about it. Okay? So there it is. That's an example of how it could be good if you wanted to check your email. So my father-in-law, when he's in Ecuador, logs into the system, and instead of saying, like in this case scenario, I said, OK, I want to go to Australia and browse the internet as if I'm in Australia. In his case, he goes and says, I just want to connect back to the Bay Area so I can check my email. So he just connects back to the Bay Area, and then he can check his email. So a lot of you are international students. That may be relevant for you guys as well. So let's continue on. Passwords. So this is a little bit out of date. This is from a couple years ago. There are some Russian hackers that now have 1.2 billion passwords that have been used. You guys have heard about that. You hear this on the news, like, oh, the Target got hacked, and they stole a bunch of stuff, and Experian got hacked, right? You guys have all heard this stuff. Well, every time they do, they get more passwords in their archive, which is a bad thing. The average internet user has 27 accounts and about 6.5 passwords. Okay? Most normal passwords can be cracked in about 90 seconds or less. Let's look at some passwords. 1 in 10 passwords are a name plus a year. Now, I'm not going to make you raise your hands, but as I go through these, think about how many of your passwords fall into these categories. 2 in 1,000 passwords are the word password. Bad idea. Love is the most common verb in a password. It's 12 times more likely than hate. I'm just saying. The most popular adjectives in a password are sexy, hot, and pink. It's kind of humorous, right? So the thing about it is that the faster computers are getting, the easier it is for a computer to crack a password, even if it's a brute force crack on a password. Okay? So they use graphics cards to do this because they're faster at processing it. So this particular computer, which was designed to crack passwords, can try an average of 8.2 billion password combinations each second as you go through. So that's what's called brute forcing a password. So you start with, if let's say the password's 8 characters long, you start with A, B, A, C, and you just keep throwing things at it. Okay, that's one way to crack a password. The truth is that the more passwords that are discovered, the more likely it is that one of the passwords that you're using is one of those passwords. So let's say that you guys decided to be hackers and you decided to try to crack somebody's password. Would you start with all A's, or would you start with the known list of 1.2 billion passwords? You'd start with the known list of passwords and you try all those passwords first because they're already known passwords. There's the computer. So the other thing is that tricks don't work. Because guess what? Somebody else has already used the trick. So I like this one. Mustache, and then it's mustache spelled backwards. I don't even think I could do that. I don't think I could spell mustache forwards correctly. Anyway, so it's a word that's forwards and then backwards. Or number and letter substitutions. Oh, instead of an E, it's a 3. It's a whatever. Okay? Adding exclamation points at the end. All of those things are obvious known things that people do with passwords. So any combination of these strategies really doesn't work either. So you say, I'm not in a good place right now. How do I figure this out? How do I use passwords? Okay? So the truth is, to be actually secure in your passwords, you should not use the same password twice. So on all those websites that you have accounts for, every one of them should have a different password on it. That protects you, because when Target gets hacked and they steal your password and you have to change it, well, no big deal, because I only used it on that one site. So that protects you. Use a password that contains numbers, letters, and symbols. It's the greatest combination of characters that you can, assuming the website allows it. There's nothing, once you get into this security frame of mind, there's nothing more annoying than a website that won't accept symbols in their passwords. You're like, what do you mean you won't accept symbols? Like, come on. Right? Make sure the password is completely random. The more random it is, the harder it is for it to crack. If you can't remember it, that's a great password. You say, well, wait a minute. You just said if I can't remember it, that's a great password. How on earth do I use it? Use a password manager. And it's starting to be more and more common. It's built into our phones now. It's built into our web browsers where they'll start to store your passwords for you. And so you need some way of authenticating who you are. It's a master password. It's your face recognition on your phone, whatever it is that lets you in. Once you have that master password, then it'll fill in all the rest of the passwords for you. You can use the built-in systems, whether it's in Windows or whether it's in the keychain in Mac, or you can use one of these other separate third-party applications. I happen to use 1Password. That's the one that I use. I've used it for years, and I love it. So every one of my passwords is at least 24 characters, completely random strings. So I have no words. I have no pink, hot, or sexy in any of my passwords. I have no dates. I have no names. It's just random characters of numbers. And you know what? That's really, really secure. So this is what it looks like when it stores your passwords. A good password manager will encrypt your passwords. Obviously, you don't want somebody stealing your data, that's all your passwords that are stored. That would be bad. So we need to encrypt it somewhere. It needs to integrate with your operating system and all your web browsers. So I'll tell you right now that my particular system is awful when I use a lab computer. Because if I want to log into my Gmail account from the lab computer, not from my laptop, I have to pull out my phone. I have to go into the password manager. I have to look at the characters on my Gmail account password, and I have to manually type in 25 characters that are random. It's really annoying. But If I'm browsing on my computer, or if I'm browsing on my phone, or I'm browsing on my iPad, I don't ever see those passwords. It just authenticates me, fingerprint, face, or once I've logged in with a master password on my Mac. That's really pretty easy. So if it's easy to use, you'll use it. That's good. It should be able to generate complex, completely random passwords. So it should be able to just say, oh, this is a new account. Let me generate a random password for you, and then I'll save it. Separate passwords for each online account so you don't repeat. And a desktop version and a mobile version is obviously important as well. The other thing that's becoming really, really popular, especially with things like banks, is the two-factor authentication. My guess is you've already had to do this before. This is where you try to log in somewhere and they say, we need to send you a text message. And you get a text message and then you put in their code. It's a way of verifying who you are. So somebody didn't just crack your password and put that password in. They also are verifying, yeah, you have your phone attached to you. Or you can access that other account to verify it. So that's certainly more secure. It takes a little bit more work. I mean, you guys have all done this with your bank. Like, I just need to get into my bank. I don't want you to send me a text message. Just let me in. You know, it is what it is. So that's two-factor authentication. That dramatically increases the security on all of your accounts. So identity theft is another big thing. So yeah, this has happened to me. 9 million Americans have their identity stolen each year. 15 billion was stolen from consumers in 2015, and it can happen to you. So I consider myself to be a very security conscious person. I'm careful online. I secure my passwords. I use all that stuff. I got a call. This was a couple years ago. I got a call from my, it happened to be my bank, saying, I want to verify this new credit card that you signed up for. I said, I didn't sign up for that credit card. Then I started to get really sketched out, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. How do I know you're actually my bank? So I'm like, I'm going to hang up now. And so I hung up, and I called my bank. And I said, somebody just called me from you and said that I opened a new credit card. They're like, oh, yes, Mr. Adams, you did open a new credit card. I said, no, I didn't. So, well, hold on a second. Let me find out. Yeah, you opened a new credit. It has a really high credit limit. Congratulations. I'm like, no, I didn't open that. She's like, OK, well, hold on. Let me transfer you to the fraud department. So I get over there. Somebody had opened a credit card. Somebody had signed up for a $25,000 personal loan from Discover. They'd opened a Discover card. They opened a internet account from Comcast in Houston, Texas. Go figure. They bought 8 cell phones in LA from T-Mobile. They opened another 4 from, I think it was Verizon, and a couple in AT&T. The Verizon ones were in San Jose, and the AT&T ones, I forget where they were. All of this happened over the course of 3 days. They did all of this. So I'm saying, well, wait a minute. I'm really secure online. Like, I'm really careful about all this stuff. What happened? They stole it out of my mailbox. So guess what? Now I have a locking mailbox. So the point is that it can happen to you. So no matter how much you secure your digital world, you have to secure your physical world as well. So it's not a bad idea to have a locking mailbox. So it was a complete pain in the butt, for lack of a better term, to deal with this. I filed police reports, etc. The scary part of it is I actually, through the police reports and the follow-up reports and whatever, the cell phones that they opened from T-Mobile in LA, they went and interviewed the people that like opened the cell phone, or they interviewed the staff that allowed it to be opened and whatever. This is the sheriff. The people actually showed an ID with my name on it. That's scary, like a driver's license. So they had done that much forgery work to actually do it. So the point is, this is big business. And luckily, I wasn't liable for any of it because it obviously wasn't me. But it takes a bunch of paperwork, and you gotta file police reports and whatever. And then furthermore, from then on, you have in your credit report, you have a block on actually signing up for anything new. So if you want to open a new credit card or you want to get something, you have to do all this extra authentication. Yes, I really do want that. So it can be a big pain. You can check and see how you're doing on a free website called creditkarma.com if you want to check on your credit scores and see how things are going and see if anybody's opened accounts in Houston, Texas in your name or whatever. You can do that as well. So I just like to throw that out there because I thought I was being all careful, and it turns out I wasn't. So, OK. We're almost done. Branding yourself. So take a second. Most of your computers are off. Warm up your computers. And I'm going to have you do something for me. So once you have your computer open, I want you to go to Google, and I want you to type in your name. Doing vanity searches now. So when you type in your name, how many people see yourself as the top result? Nice. A couple of you are good. So the thing about your online identity is there are other people with your name. And when you search for yourself, or you search for you get cross-listed with all these other people. So you want to think about how do you control who you are online such that when some future employer someday wants to look you up, they can actually look you up. What's the first thing somebody does when they're evaluating candidates for a job? Type your name in Google. Second thing they do, type your name in Facebook. Sounds silly, but they want to find out as much information as they can about you. They basically stalk you through your online identity. So you want to think about that, and you want to start cultivating how does Google actually see you? How do they put your content together with your name? And this is not easy. It's something that takes time and patience to try to get there. You can try another search engine if you want to search through that. But you can do that, and you can further this by associating your name and your content all together. You can do that by using the same username across a lot of sites. So you're kind of saying, this is all me, and laying claim to that. You could buy a domain name and create your own website. That would be one way of doing it. And you're basically trying to brand yourself. I'm going to skip through some of these because they're not so relevant anymore. This is if you wanted to buy your own domain name, you can. And these are the registrars. I'm going to skip through that. The other thing that you could do is you can create a one-page like biography of you. It's called a personal landing page. This is who I am. This is the content that I create. Here it all is. And you can point people to that. And it's a great way of saying, this is me, and this is what I create. There were some really fantastic websites that used to do this for you. They all have gone out of business or started charging money, so I'm not going to make you do it today. But I want you to be aware that this is something that you can do to help actively manage your online identity. And so this was the one that now is not free anymore, but it was a pretty good one while it lasted. There's a few other ones to help associate your name with your particular content. The other thing you want to do is, if you feel comfortable doing it, if, let's say, you post a lot of content to YouTube or something, you cross-list that content with the other things that you do. So a good example of that is on the Digital Tools site. You can choose to put in additional information. If you browse to something that I wrote on the Digital Tools site, it has a picture of me, it says this is who I am, and it has the other little links to things that I do. My YouTube channel, all the videos that I post, etc. So it's a way of kind of wrapping me up into this is me and this is what I do. You want to think about privacy here, and I'll make a side note about Facebook. Facebook is so not current anymore, and I know that you guys don't care about it at all anymore, but your parents probably do at this point. But with any of these things, and I'm using Facebook as the example, but it really doesn't matter what you post it on. But when you post silly pictures, guess what? Those exist online from then on. And so somebody, some future employer might run across those, and they might say, maybe I don't want to hire this person. And so you just want to be aware of the content that you post because it does follow you. You create a little digital trail of stuff that you've done online. And so it's important for you guys that are, especially those of you that are young, to be aware of that kind of baggage will follow you later on in life. I am very, very thankful that I was in college before all of this happened. So there are no bad pictures of me out there. The other thing that you can do if you have your own domain name, which is kind of nice, is you can set up an email account like grant@digitaltoolsforarchitects.com or grant@acoproperties.com. That's my business. So that's a very professional email. It's different than grant@gmail.com, for example. Not that that's bad, but it's another way of really branding yourself. And you can set that up. using a variety of hosting platforms, etc. If it's something you're really interested in, I can help you with that as well. So we'll just skip on. There we go. So the idea here is that you want to create content, and you want that content to associate with your name. You don't want to spend too much time doing anything. You just want, when you tie your name to your content, Google will help you become that one person. Okay. One other thing that we're going to do today, as much as I'm not a fan of social networks or Facebook or whatever, LinkedIn, unfortunately or fortunately, has kind of become the standard for job hunting and companies and whatever. So building your resume on LinkedIn is something that I find important to start establishing now, because it'll help you as you go forward. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on LinkedIn, creating your LinkedIn profile. If you violently object to this, you don't have to do it, but I think it's a good idea at this point. Most of the students end up having LinkedIn profiles, and it helps you when you get further along. You've already put in information, and so when you go for that internship this summer, I know that seems like forever from now, but you already have that information because your employer is going to be asking for that. So it's something that we'll spend a little bit of time doing there as well. Okay, so I know I went a little bit longer than is typical today. Let's come back. Let's give you a little bit longer break. We'll come back at 9:25, and I'll go through everything that we're going to do in the exercise. Okay? Let's get a little time for coffee. Okay, so we're going to get started up again. I'm going to demo through several of the things on the exercise today, some of which I will let you guys just work on. Others I will actually walk you through. So a couple things to get started. Before we actually start on the exercise, I want to talk about comments on the course website. Today I'm going to ask that you all do one comment, only one. You don't have to do three, just one comment. So when you first come into class in the morning, it's usually 5 minutes or so before I officially start lecturing. So class starts at 7:55. You come in, you get your computer on and whatever. That's a perfect time to write some comments. And if you do that every day, you'll never be behind on the comments, and it'll be easy. So if you get in the habit of just doing that, it makes life really easy. Obviously today we're doing it at the start of the exercise, but I wanted to be able to demo it and record it, etc. So when you go to do the comments, the easiest way of doing it is to go to the student work section and then look for, in this case, we're going to comment on exercise 101. This filters all the student work to just exercise 101. This is where we're going to start with our comments. So let's say that I find something interesting. Let's say it's this one. Okay, so I might look at it, I might read it, and I might say, okay, it's time for me to write a comment. And so number one, I want to make sure that I'm already logged in to the website. And being logged in, when I come down here to submit a comment, it'll say you are commenting as me. That's a good thing. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type my comment. Now, I have a minimum of 25 characters on the comment. That's so that you can't just say cool and post the comment. That won't work. So you have to actually try to articulate something useful to the person. So I might say something like, let's see. I find this building interesting. I find this building interesting because of the juxtaposition of building materials, or something like that, where it's actually trying to be constructive and useful, right? Then I will go ahead and I'll click Post Comment. Now, I've already been approved to make comments, so my comment will show up right away. There it is. For you guys, your first comment will go into a spam queue that I'll have to manually approve. Once you've been approved once, then all your comments will show up right away. In rare cases over the course of the semester, especially if you're typing comments too fast, you'll get put into the spam queue again. If you find that your comments aren't showing up right away, tell me, and I'll go in and unspam you. It's all protections so that we don't get a bunch of Viagra ads or whatever on the comment system. So we're trying to keep it clean, etc. So that's how the commenting will work today. I ask that you please write one comment today on your exercise 101. That's all that's required. So that's part of what we're doing today. I'm going to move now into the actual exercise 102. And under part one, I'm talking about the OneDrive sync process. So I haven't logged into my own OneDrive yet, and I did that on purpose, so I will do it in front of you so that you guys can kind of follow along as it goes through. I do have on the course website under the tutorial section this first one here, Digital Life 0.2 OneDrive, will walk you through how all of this setup works. I'm going to go ahead and do that for you live now. So I have my flash drive plugged in to the computer. So that's number one. I have to have that plugged in for it to start. The other thing I will caution you to do is pay attention to which one of the 4 USB ports you use on the front of the computer, and always plug your flash drive into the same one. Windows does this wonderful thing of changing drive letters, and that can mess things up when it doesn't know where certain files are or whatever. So generally speaking, if you're consistent and you always plug it into the one, the second one or something, it'll remain fairly consistent going forward, and it alleviates problems. So anyway, I have mine already plugged in, which is good. It's now time to set up the OneDrive. And so we can access OneDrive in one of 2 ways. There's a link on the desktop here for OneDrive. There is also in the tray down at the bottom by the clock, there is access to the little cloud icon. It should be gray with a slash through it right now. If I click on that little gray with a slash through it, it will bring up this OneDrive menu and say OneDrive isn't connected. Okay, yeah, no surprise. I'm going to click on Sign In. And so here, when you get to this page, this is going to be your Insight email address. You're going to type that one in. For me, it's different than yours because mine's a faculty one. But I will type that email address in, and when I click Sign In, I think yours is presented with this. Yours might go directly to the login. Yours goes directly to the login. So this is a little bit different for me because I'm a faculty member. There's the login page, and I'll have to enter my password. Yours might look slightly different. I think it has a DVC brand on it, but you can essentially do the same thing. Don't keep clicking next, though, because I'm going to show you something in just a second. OK, so right here, immediately after I've signed in, I get this screen right here. Your OneDrive folder. By default, it puts your OneDrive folder on the hard drive of the computer. We don't want it on the hard drive of the computer. We want to specify our flash drive instead. So right here, I'm going to click this link for Change Location. So I'll click on Change Location, and it's here that I'm going to choose my flash drive instead of my OneDrive, or instead of my hard drive. So I'll come down here. Mine happens to be my name, and it's drive letter I. So I'll click on that. And once I do that, I'll go ahead and say Select Folder. Now for me, I already have a OneDrive folder here because I do this sync every time that I get my computer set up. So I'm going to use this location. Yes, it already has files in it, but that's my OneDrive folder. So I'll click on that. So it should be your flash drive. That's really important that it's your flash drive. Once you're done, you'll go ahead and click Next, and you can go through all the rest of the default options here. We just go through like that. There we go. The last one, we open my OneDrive folder, and there it is. So this is on, it's on the computer, but it's on my little flash drive here. And so there's my OneDrive folder, and it's syncing all of this content. Now, unfortunately, because these computers are frozen, when you come back in next class, you'll have to do this again. So when you first sit down on your computer every time, you have to start OneDrive and get it to sync to your flash drive. It's annoying, but there's no way around it because the computers are frozen. So it's just the way it works. So we want to make sure that you guys get really comfortable and can do that. OneDrive will then sync all your files, and you'll make sure that you're backed up. It can be a little bit sticky when you go to turn off your computer or to leave, because it might not let you eject your flash drive. So in here, if I wanted to eject my hard drive, yeah, it says the device is currently in use because OneDrive is syncing to it. So in that scenario, the best strategy is just to turn off the computer. So actually power it off and shut the computer down completely. You would go to the Windows menu here, you'd go to Power, and you'd say Shut Down. When the computer's off, it's safe to eject. The other option would be to pause the syncing and or quit OneDrive. It's just a little bit convoluted. The easiest way is to just turn off the computer, and then you know you're safe to eject. So this will back up all the content that is in the OneDrive folder on your flash drive. You see I have other stuff outside of it that I'm not backing up, but everything in the OneDrive folder itself is being backed up. So that's the first part. That's part one. I want to make sure you guys get that situated today. The next part, in part two, is all about the calendars and syncing the calendars. So I've gone ahead for purposes of demo, and I've logged into 3 generic accounts that I have for this demo. A Google account, a Yahoo account, and an Outlook account, so you can see me do this calendar subscription in each. They're all roughly the same, but you have to get to them a little bit differently. So if I went back to our digital tools class and I went to today's exercise, there it is. We're doing this part 2 section right here. At the very end of part 2, the calendar feed for Archie 135 is this. So it's a nasty little address there, but that is the live feed of the calendar that will then allow you to subscribe. So with this selected, make sure there's no space in front of or behind it. With it selected, you're going to right-click and say copy. That will copy that long address. I'm not expecting you to actually type it in. That's way too annoying. And at that point, we can switch over into one of our calendars. You guys will log in probably to Gmail or to Yahoo or to Outlook. I'm guessing those are the big 3. If you're using a different email client, I can help you figure out where to put it in. So I'll do this under 3, look for the exercise 102, not the lecture. I will do this for the 3 different options here. I'll start with Google Calendar and bringing that in. So in Google Calendar, like I said, I have just a blank calendar. There's nothing actually here, so it'll be easy to see. I'm going to come down here under Other Calendars on the left side. I'll click the plus sign where it says, do you want to add other calendars? This option here, From URL, that's the one we want. And when I click on the From URL option, it will bring up this From URL little dialog box. And I will go ahead and I will paste in that long, nasty address. Once I'm done, I'll click on the Add Calendar button. And then I can go back to my calendar itself. There it is. And guess what? There is everything coming in for Lecture 102. If I go forward into next week, notice we have nothing here. So we just have our calendar there. If we go forward, there it is, 104, 105, etc. So it all just comes in. You didn't have to type it in at all. If you're working in Yahoo Calendar, so this one's a little bit different. Similar concept. We're going to come down here on the left side into the Others section. And when you hover over Others, there's a little gear icon that shows up next to it. We'll click on that gear icon, and it says Follow Other Calendars. We can name this calendar Archie 135. And in the iCal address field, that's where we're going to paste the long string of addresses here. And then we'll go ahead and click on Continue. And it should show up. Not sure why it didn't. There it is. Just took a second to show up. And there are the days in the calendar. Here. There it is, going forward into September.
How do we get the URL again?
The URL, if you go to today's exercise, exercise 102 here, at the very bottom of part 2, there's the URL for the calendar feed. Last one is with Outlook. So Outlook's calendar. In Outlook, we're going to go to, sorry, I forget all these all the time. We're going to go to Import Calendar. And here, notice we have all of our sports teams here. We're going to do it from the web. So instead of one of the popular calendars, we're going to go from the web. And link to calendar, this is where we'll paste in the iCal address. There it is. Calendar name, this would be Archie 135. And I'll go ahead and click on Import. Perfect. It'll say the calendar was imported successfully, and no surprise, there it is, showing up on all the days, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to ask that when you're done subscribing to the calendar and you get it actually to come into your calendar, leave that open in a tab. I will walk around and confirm that you all have done it a little bit later on. You actually aren't going to post anything on the course website today, so your check off for having been here and doing the exercise is that I'll come around and look at your calendar. So leave that open. You don't need to close it down. And that gets us through part 2. Part 3 is optional. It's about consolidating your email accounts should you want to. I already went through and I demoed how that process works for your various email accounts, or I showed screenshots of it up there. Part 4 is to create a LinkedIn profile if you don't already have one, and or update that profile. When you're done updating that profile, go ahead and go to your digital tools site, go into your profile on digital tools. So I'll go into my dashboard. Remember, mine's a little bit different. Yours will show up here under your profile, like that. And then down here, there's a spot to put in your LinkedIn profile. And you'll want to copy and paste your LinkedIn into that profile. The advantage here is that when you start posting content, let's see if I can. Right here, for example, next to my picture, I have a link to my LinkedIn page. So that would take me to my LinkedIn page. There I am. And I've also added in other things. So right here, you could go to my YouTube channel, for example, and that would take you to YouTube and all of my lectures. So that shows up. And this helps with your Google associations. So when the Google site crawlers come and they look at your content, they see your name, they see the content that you did, they see your name, and they see your other links that are about you. So it helps with your PageRank system. So that's why I encourage you to go through and do that. So minimum, you should put your LinkedIn page in there. If you want to add anything else, you can do that as well. Okay? You see that if you flip the page over under part 5, it's all striked out. That's because the website stopped letting it happen for free. So I'm not going to make you pay for anything, so we're not going to do that part. And then we go through updating your profile. That's what I just did. You'll notice that I have a picture here. This picture is through a system called Gravatar. As much as I would rather have you just upload the picture and call it a day on the website, the way WordPress, the back end of this website works, they make you go through this system to do it. I have a tutorial that walks through how to do that, should you want to have your picture associated with your posts. Otherwise, it just is kind of a generic shadow person. So that's available to you if you want. That's also optional. And I'm reminding you to bring your phone or digital camera next Wednesday. Remember, don't have class on Monday. Okay? So I will come around and I will confirm that you have your calendars working. I would also like you all to make sure that you can get the OneDrive system working. Remember, every time you come in, you should log into OneDrive so that it's backing up your files correctly each time. Okay? Once we're done with that for the day, you guys can actually leave. We're still in the first week. We're still getting the kinks out. As we go forward, we'll start going the full time. Are there any questions? No? Okay, I'll let you guys start. Give me a second.